got to 75 people.
Yes, a football flag in.
All right, I think we're live, guys. How's it going? Oh, there's my cat.
There's your cat. How do you keep your cat from getting in the picture? My cat photobombs everything.
Well, she was leaving. She was tired of me, I think. So one thing that we need to do is we have another member joining us today. Another member, would you like to introduce yourself?
Me? Okay. My name is Nelson. I'm going to be the intern working on Azure PowerShell. I have a project where we will do some experiments. We will ship a commandlet that is going to help developers and IT pros to create a web application in very fast without being too descriptive and taking out all the hard part to them. Right now, I am also doing another project that is a script that is going to do testing SMR testing through the pull request in our GitHub repository.
Cool. Thank you, Nelson. So be on the lookout over the next, well, how long are you here, Nelson? 10 weeks?
12 weeks.
12 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. So you'll get to do 2 or 3, looks like probably two or three more with us.
Yep.
So we'll be looking forward to see what you can report on in the coming months. That will be exciting.
It is exciting.
Very cool.
It's exciting. New features.
Yeah, everyone's excited. New features, progress. So Mark, I think we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the new features that came in this release. We released 4.1.0 of Azure PowerShell last Wednesday, correct? Or am I off by a day?
I think it was last Thursday morning.
Last Thursday morning, close enough.
Yeah.
We wanted to talk a little bit about some of the features that went in, some of the features that may have changed. So we'll go ahead and start with Resolve-AzureRmError. What is that, Mark?
Well, so I was going to show you actually on, let's see if screen share will actually work this week.
Oh, it should. Let's do it. Make it work.
Well, this is not my machine, so it's unlikely to work.
Oh, you're using the machine in the room? There you go.
Yeah, see, there we are. Here we go, PowerShell.
There's me.
So one of the things that we did this time is we made use of like an old PowerShell blog that I can't remember who actually did the PowerShell blog. It might have been Snover. But anyway, there's PowerShell. Everybody knows has the error stream. It has the $error variable where we save all of the errors that happen when we ran a script or in the current session. People who know what error records are and are familiar with formatting can actually use that to find out lots of interesting things about errors. However, we have some very specialized errors in PowerShell where we actually are where they're web errors. We're going back and forth with the server, and because often there are lots of threads going on, there can be multiple errors. So we wanted to make it easier to kind of unwrap the errors that are happening, so that if somebody sees an error during a script execution and they didn't have their debug preferences turned on, that they can actually go figure out maybe what the root cause of an error was. So we have this new commandlet called Resolve-AzureRmError, and I'm going to show it now. So one thing that it can do. So let's add an error. So let's try getting a resource group without logging in. Group does not exist. And I have an error that tells me that I need to log in. Then, okay, let's go ahead and log in.
You want me to use mine?
Yeah, actually, you should probably log in.
Hey, look, there's my comment.
Not my machine. Yeah, it actually won't let me log in as somebody else, but that has to do with our own, the way that our
Yeah.
own STS works, not anything with PowerShell.
Yeah.
So we're logged in. This is awesome. There we go. And now let's try doing that again. And surprisingly, oh, that resource group actually does not. So I get that kind of an error. And let's just do a resource group that really doesn't exist, like food group 1. Okay, so that group doesn't exist. So I can run Resolve-AzureRmError over these errors. And this will go through, by default, it'll go through the entire error, but the entire error variable, but you can pass it a particular error to find out about it. And we can see the last thing on the stack is the login Azure RM account error. And before that, we had our failure to match the pattern error. And then the other error we have is provided resource group does not exist. And unfortunately, this wasn't a really great example because it doesn't actually have much of a. So if I did instead storage account dash resource group name foo dash storage account name foo. If I do this, this actually tells me you can't find that, and we do Resolve-AzureRmError in this case. And I could have done $error sub 0. And you can see that it gives me quite a bit more information with the exception that's going on. One of the things that you can see here is that it's got a server message. It's got a server response. It's got a request message. And you can see that these are actually things that I can explore. So I can take the output of this and actually go find out everything that was in the request message or the response. And even in this default view, you can see that I can see what the actual request was, what the actual request URI was. So hopefully this will give you a lot, and it gives you the standard invocation info and that kind of stuff. So hopefully this will help a lot with debugging errors that happen when you don't have the debug preferences turned on.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
That's my demo.
Nice.
Group 1.
Yeah, I was crossing my fingers.
Yeah, that was it could have been bad if Cormac had it. No error. The entire demo would have been messed up. So one thing that you talked about, Mark, was kind of the impetus for why we wanted to do this. What is the primary scenario that you'd say, like, the number one reason people need to go back and look at these errors?
Well, so there are two things. One is the default. But the main thing is that often what will happen with these kinds of errors is that basically there's an issue with the request, and or an issue with the server response, and this gives you a much better insight into what the server response is for that stuff. The other thing is that because often I'll run a script, and then there'll be an error somewhere in the script, and it's hard for me to, I just get the default error stuff. So yep. This actually just gives me a quick way to go back and be able to debug all the errors in the script. Yeah, it's not impossible to do it without this. This is just kind of a convenience to make.
Exactly. A lot of sometimes in some circumstances you have to say do verbose to see the actual request and response to see what the error message was, right?
Well, debug. Yeah. So the debug stream.
Or debug, yeah.
Debug stream for our stuff always has the requests and responses, but you have to know to turn on debug preferences before you run the script. So
yeah,
this gives you some hope of finding that stuff out if you didn't turn on debug preferences before you run the script.
Exactly. Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Okay, I think it's my demo time. Let's see here. Here we go. Oh, it worked. So for whatever reason, my Control Plus is not working anywhere. It wasn't working in VS. It wasn't working. So we'll just have to go straight for like a font size increase.
Old-fashioned way. There you go.
Yeah, do it the old-fashioned way. I had the same problem in VS. VS, I think, does Control Plus too, and I couldn't get it to work earlier. So I think we actually talked about send feedback last month. It's still there, and we really encourage people to try out send feedback. So if you find yourself watching this part of the video, you should totally open up PowerShell and type send feedback to send us some feedback. So it's just send-feedback.
Even send feedback. Even send us feedback on send feedback.
Exactly. So I actually did that once because we had a little bit of an issue with it, and so I sent feedback on send feedback. You had to be logged in, and we wanted to.
That's actually one thing that we fixed this time, which is another reason we're talking about it now. Because
True.
send feedback when you're offline.
Yes, you don't have to even log in. You can just let us know that the login experience was bad and you are still not logged in, let's say. So you can send feedback. It's just send feedback, no parameters. And when you fire off this commandlet, you actually get some prompting. So we actually ask you a quick question about your likelihood to recommend. Let's go with a 9. I'd say it's a 9. We ask you what we do well. So if there's something about Azure PowerShell that you particularly like, if there's a paradigm that we follow, or if there's a new commandlet that you're super happy about us shipping, let us know. We'll be sure to pass on some of that information to the teams that have worked hard to ship those commandlets to you. So I might say that send feedback is a great idea. And then we want to know what we could improve. So if there's some pain points that you have, for example, like in Mark's last demo, say that one of your pain points is that you run a commandlet, you don't get a good error message back, and then now the only way to get that error message is to rerun the commandlet with debug or debug preference. So you might give us some feedback on what we can improve, either commandlet functionality or general architecture of Azure PowerShell. And then the last question is your email. If you'd like to provide it to us, we may send you an email to ask you any follow-up questions. So I'm going to go ahead and just get out of that so that we don't actually send anything. We don't send any fake data for now. So please send us feedback. If you are watching this, go do it right now. It'll take you 2 minutes max, let's say. Send feedback, and then we can work on improving the product, hopefully make it better for everyone. So please do that. I'm pushing this too hard, aren't I?
No, we will. We should. I mean, this is the GitHub issues are great. Do what you want to send feedback, but this is the most direct thing, and this is going to get the most immediate response from us.
Exactly.
This is an area we're really concentrating on right now, making it easier for people to look at feedback and looking at user feedback. So, if you want to have an impact, send feedback.
Yep. Awesome. Okay, so I think, Cormac, you were scheduled to talk a little bit about the NetCore preview. That is the Azure PowerShell built on top of the .NET standard versions of the Azure SDK for C#/.NET. But we haven't quite shipped them yet. So there's actually a PR open right now. It's currently under review. And what have we shipped so far, Cormac? Like what is converted to .NET Core? What can run in PowerShell Core?
Right. So we have so existing right now. If you go to the gallery and you look up the core modules that we have, you're going to get the profile commandlets. Then right now, what HostUp has been working on is converting compute. We've got network, websites, and I believe one other one, storage.
Yeah. Storage control plane. Yeah.
Yes, storage control plane. So we've got those 4. I think it's 4. And on top of what we had previously. So those will be able to be consumed across all platforms whenever we come out with that image. But I know that you've been working on getting a Docker image out for that for testing purposes.
Yeah.
I think we should probably, so we were going to have a link ready for this. The link will likely be ready very soon, so we should probably post it to this.
Yeah, I can do that.
I'll probably post it here as soon as it's ready.
Good idea. Yeah. So check the description, and at such a time as the Azure PowerShell Core commit or modules are on the PowerShell gallery, I will add a link to that in the description. So check out the description for that. I will show the Docker image real quick. I'm on a Windows machine, so that makes it immediately less interesting. So I'll just show the page real quick where you can look it up. So we have this is just my repo. This is an unofficial image. As soon as these modules actually get pulled in to the master branch, we're pulling them into master, right? Or are we pulling them into preview?
They'll eventually get into. They'll go into master in the next release. Yeah, we're pulling them into preview.
Preview for now. Okay. So once they're pulled in and actually shipped, I'll cut a new Docker image based off of that, and then I will upload that to the official channel, which is Azure SDK. So it's just my username / Azure PowerShell core, and because there's no official version right now, I'm just tagging latest, and I'm periodically pulling from that pull request and cutting a new image for each of those. So if you're sitting on a Windows or Mac machine, you can just do Docker. Did I say Windows or Mac? Did I say Linux or Mac? I don't know what I said. But
You meant Linux or Mac.
I meant Linux or Mac, yeah. You can also do this on Windows, but I'm having a little bit of an issue with Linux containers on Windows right now. That's not Azure PowerShell's fault. That's just, let's blame, who should we blame? I don't know. So I'm not going to run the Linux container on Windows right now, but you would just do Docker run -it. We want interactive, and we want to get the TTY open. It's up to you. I like to do --rm because, especially if I'm just trying an image out, I don't want to keep that machine up and running. So --rm will kill that Docker container once you're done running it. And then it's just twitch.x / Azure PowerShell core latest. And you don't actually have to type latest. Docker will pick up the latest if you don't want to type the tag name there. So do that. If I were to run this right now, it would fail because I'm currently on Windows containers mode. So check it out. You can send feedback from there as well, because the profile module is part of that. It is actually built into the image that I've curated here. So you can actually send feedback from there. If something isn't working, you can file bugs as well, because we'll be sure to work on those because we want them to be nice in Mac and Linux. So let us know what you think, but they should be shipping soon in the PowerShell gallery. So this is just another way to access the commandlets, and it might be a quick and easy way for you to try it out on your Mac or Linux box if you can't quite install it yet, or don't want to install PowerShell 6 yet, let's say. You can just spin up this Docker image.
No reason not to install PowerShell 6. It's like,
yeah,
it's just an Xcopy install essentially. So
yep. But some people don't. That's like the value add of Docker once we have the modules out in the PowerShell gallery. The value add of Docker is just that for whatever reason you might be on a machine where you don't want to mess with the path, or you don't want to, have any extra installation, then you might, or you just want to try it out. You might use this to deploy onto, say, an ACS cluster as a management tool. Like, you can do that as well. So that's where the value add of having this Docker image is. So.
Yeah. No, I'm not. The Docker images are awesome, and we've had lots of requests for them. I'm just saying, PowerShell core is awesome. People should install it. People shouldn't be afraid to install PowerShell core.
Yeah. If you can't, or if you just want to try it out, feel free to use the image. Otherwise, install. I have PowerShell 6 on both my Linux and Mac box right now. And the modules that Hovsep is currently in PR work great inside and outside of the Docker container. So we had a little bit of note that people might have seen earlier. We have managed key support in storage. I think our agenda was up there on the side. We're actually going to talk about that next month because it's still in private preview. So one of the members of the storage team will be coming to talk about that and do a quick demo. So we'll skip over that. We have a little bit of a discussion around experiments that we wanted to talk about. Nelson just mentioned the fact that he is going to be working on some experiments for us. Part of what we're doing over the next 6 months is investigating ways to improve the experience when you first get started with Azure PowerShell. So what do you guys think? Should we show a little bit of examples, or kind of?
I think that'd be awesome.
Okay, let's do it. So, man, I'm talking a lot this time. I normally try to make you guys talk.
You're the P1. Imagine.
My job is to talk. So one of the things that we're really looking at here is the fact that our commandlets and the scripts that you write to build out your infrastructure in Azure can sometimes be, let's say, long-winded. So in this case, this is the sample up here for creating a VM. This is one of the simplest ways you can do it, actually. You have to create subnet config, VNet, a public IP, NSG, rules, and the NSG, and the NIC, and then a big VM config object. And then you can finally kick off that create operation. So we've actually gotten some feedback already. Mark and I did some customer interviews a day before build this year. And a lot of you, our existing customers, will tell us that these actually are, while they look long, they're okay because they follow a logical order. All of the parameter names tend to make sense. And a lot of times you're going to take this, copy it from a friend or copy it off of docs.microsoft.com, edit some variables, and then pass it on. Put it in your store somewhere and then run that script whenever you need it. Same thing for websites. It's a little bit long-winded, but many of you would say that it makes sense. I would argue that some of this tends to get to a place that it doesn't make sense. Right here, we're downloading a publishing profile and then using XPath to grab specific nodes from that XML that we've received. Not the greatest experience, let's just say, and we recognize that. So part of what we've done is take a look at some of our own products like Azure CLI and how difficult these similar scenarios are in that product. And we've looked at some of our competitors, Heroku, or now Google Cloud. And what we've done is we've come up with some ideas. At this time, actually, I can make these bigger. Is it a little bit hard to see, Scott?
We're good now.
Cool. So at this time, sorry, I'm trying to make it interactive and make other people speak. Hey, Scott, can you see it?
Now that I put my glasses on, I can see it clearly.
Yeah. So what we've done here is come up with ideas. And so what we don't want to do is say, this is the route we're going. The goal here is for us to aggressively investigate what users actually want to see when they first sit down and start to use Azure PowerShell. One caveat here is that all of the existing functionality will continue to be supported. So if you have scripts that use that are way up there at the top that I showed you before, those scripts will continue to work in the same manner. Unless there's some type of service side breaking change, we do not plan on changing the existing functionality there. What we're trying to do is add new parameter sets and new functionality, new paradigms that might assist you in getting started faster, especially for the 80% case. Some of these might be more REPL oriented, some of them might be more script oriented, but they're all just different ideas. So I'm going to list a few of them off really quickly here. And if you'd like, feel free to comment in the YouTube video on things that you like. We're going to be running interviews. We're going to be reaching out to some of you and seeing if you can come in or do a hangout with me and talk about what you would or would not like, stack rank some of these things so that we can start to get a sense of what users would like. So, sorry, comment?
No, I should just mention that we've been over this with the PowerShell core team as well.
Yes.
So for people who are interested, they're actually interested in what we come back with these experiments as things that they might do in a future version of PowerShell when it comes to how to deal with defaults with required parameters that might have defaults.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Yeah. So that's one thing you will notice. Mark makes a really good point. Some of this functionality or some of these paradigms don't currently exist in PowerShell, but we have a close relationship with them, and they're eager to see what some of the results of these experiments are, just to see what they might want to do in the future. So I'm going to go through them pretty quickly so that we don't spend too much time. We still have a few more things we want to talk about, and then we have a few people that have joined that we'd like to see if they have any questions for us towards the end. So the first example is, what if we just do it? And so that means you type a commandlet, say new AZVM. You'll notice that we're looking at doing new shorter names. We'll still alias to the older, longer names, but maybe shorter names so it's a little bit easier to type. And then in this case, we kind of have some smart defaults. We know that you're on a Windows box, so we create a random name for you, a new resource group for that image, or sorry, for that VM. We choose a Windows Server image because you're sitting on a Windows box, let's say. We're going to open up RDP and PS Remote for you automatically because you're, again, on this Windows box. And then we're going to let you know some of the other defaults that we've selected, like whether we selected a dynamic IP or a static IP, or what the size is that we selected for you. So again, these are just options. That's one option. Another option is similar. It goes along the same lines where required parameters become, in some circumstances, what we call gray, or what we're currently calling gray. I don't know what we would call it in the future. That's just the random word I came up with. We could call it required parameters with defaults. So what we would do is say, okay, you didn't pass resource group, and that's a required parameter. So instead, but we have some context. One, we know that you have other resource groups, and two, you might want to create a new one. And so what we do is we might say, hey, the default, if you do nothing, is to create a new one named myrg, some random integer, and then, or you can select one of your existing resource groups, or finally, if you don't like any of those, you can type a new name for a new resource. So you kind of get more of a directed experience where you can choose an existing resource group, you can create a new one that we've recommended, or you can create a new one with a new name. So that's another one. Again, similar defaults would be selected there as well. Another one is to move away from any type of scenario where the commandlet itself would have default, like just automatically do everything for you. And so we had the idea of maybe a parameter that auto-generates, quote unquote, the rest. So we'd have a switch parameter that auto-generates the rest. So if you pass -name, we'll select your name, but any other parameter that you could have passed will auto-generate for you. Even the ones that are a little bit more involved, like choosing a good resource group, we'll figure it out and put that VM in a new resource group, let's say. So it's similar to the first one, but it's more explicit where you actually have to pass auto. So, and again, and this is kind of showing that down here. Another idea that we have, this one is, and the team can correct me if I'm wrong, we're probably going to implement something like this almost regardless of feedback, because there are so many other products that do something similar, and we've already gotten good feedback on this, and it's universally accepted as a nice way to go, is to be able to, say, create a resource group and set it as the default for your session, or set an existing resource group as the default for your session. So you'll notice here, I've passed name and image, but I haven't passed resource group. Resource group is required, but because we've set the resource group, this new resource group that I created, as the default for my session, it'll just automatically be picked up and applied to every commandlet that I run henceforth. You can still override it by passing the resource group, and then we may or may not have an option where you can persist that default beyond the session. So we'll save it down to your profile, the next time you pull up Azure PowerShell, we'll pull up those defaults again. This could be, we could do this with other parameters too. Say location, for example, is one of those parameters that's a lot of commandlets take, and we want to just make it easier so that you're like, I know I'm working in this resource group and I want central US, and then you'll just get those by default as you run the rest of your commandlets. Another thing that we're thinking about doing, oh look, we've got Joey joined. Hopefully Joey, you might be muted, but no, it looks like you're, oh no, I invited you specifically, so you got the special link. So Joey, you can answer some questions at the end as well. We've got some people who might ask some questions here. Yep, we can hear you just fine. I didn't think so either. I'm not sure how that happened, but whatever. So we've got a few other ideas coming. One of them is defaults that are smart. I showed you earlier when we, say, selected a Windows Server image because you were sitting on a Windows box. We were thinking it might be nice when you select an Ubuntu image to, why would you want to open up the PS remote and RDP ports? You're going to want to open up SSH, right? And to go along with this, maybe if you were running your PowerShell commandlets from a Linux box, we create an Ubuntu VM by default if you don't select an image. That's another idea that we'll be experimenting with. Some other ideas that we had are around size. So one thing that might be interesting, this is probably the most contentious one, but it's an idea, is that you pass some generic integer and then we choose the best size fit for you that is below that dollar amount per month, let's say. You don't know what the sizes are for VMs, you don't care, but you don't want it to be more than $50, let's say, per month. So you just pass -size 50, and then we'll select one for you and let you know kind of what that rate is. This is definitely a little bit more far off, especially because some of this infrastructure isn't quite here yet anyway, but it's an idea that we had.
So one thing I'd want to point out about that is that this is not meant to replace. If you know exactly what size, we're not going to replace your ability to specify a specific size in a script. So this wouldn't like replace that parameter. This would be an alternate way that you could decide on a size. Correct.
And then the last one here is maybe we should have better instructions after you do something. So you create new AZ VM. Might it be nice to give you some type of feedback about what your next steps are? Many of us may know that we can SSH right into our VM using the DNS label .location.cloudapp.azure.com, but many of us may not know that, and it might be a good way to just get people started with Azure to say, hey, here's the quick and easy way to interact with the resource you just created.
Just to be clear, this is not us returning text. This would
correct.
This would be either formatting or going out to one of the streams that it's appropriate to put text in.
Correct. Yeah. So the return type would still be the same, similar to what it is today. The same or similar as to what it is today. We would just give you some extra information in one of the streams. So I don't want to go into these other ones too much because they're similar concepts, but Nelson talked a little bit about what we want to do for web apps. And a lot of it revolves around similar scenarios where we might create a plan for you automatically, and maybe we'll detect Git repositories and add them for you. So this is the just do it scenario. We might have a gray parameter scenario where we ask you, hey, we detected a Git repository. Would you like us to add this web app as a remote named Azure? So then we'll run a git remote add Azure and then the authenticated string for you to just git push Azure master on the very next line of code. And then similar concepts thereof. So the same thing with -auto where we detected auto automatically. Maybe adding parameters where some of these features that automatically do things for you. We just have switches like add remote, and then we let you know whether we found a repository and then added a remote. And then today I showed you the XML and the XPath stuff that we had to do. It'd be a lot better if this object that we returned just had the source code management URI hanging off of it. So if you want to manually add your remote, you can just git remote add Azure that object.scm URI. You don't have to go get a publish profile and then all that extra crap going into the XML and grabbing stuff out of it. And then similar thing here, like, hey, let's let you know that you can use the SCM, and I should have formatted this better, but you can use the SCM URI to deploy via Git, GitHub, or FTP. For example, you can configure local Git with git remote add Azure. So similar concepts for both. We're kind of doing both of these in parallel. There are kind of golden scenarios here, our priorities, hero scenarios. So we're doing these experiments. We're going to be doing interviews over the next month or so, and then we'll be messaging more and more of the decisions that we've made, and we'll be starting to make these changes over the next four to 6 months. So,
but, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea here is when we get to a certain point with the experiments, that people who are listening here, MVPs and the like, will have an opportunity to look at this stuff before we make the final decision. So we'll be pushing this out for more feedback after we get through this set of interviews.
So that's, yeah, I completely forgot to mention that. So what Mark is reminding me of is the fact that, yeah, we're going to be doing interviews and we're going to be doing some experiments internally. But then we are going to, once we've kind of honed in what users, we will start to publish preview modules, and that's kind of what Nelson was talking about. He's only got 12 weeks, so within 12 weeks, and actually much sooner than that in my timeline world, we want to start shipping preview modules that have some of this functionality built in so that you can go try out some of these commandlets and then report back to us about what you did or did not like about our ideas here. So it'll start, we're starting small, starting internally, doing some interviews with internal customers, and then expanding out to preview modules from there. Cool. So I think that's it for experiments. We'll take some questions at the end on that if anybody has any questions. Scott, I think you wanted to talk about GitHub issues real quick.
I do. We've got issues.
We've got issues.
We have not done a good job in org handling or dealing with our GitHub issues. There's a large amount out there, and so some of these are stale. Some of them probably don't even repo anymore. We're going to be focusing all our efforts on ARM and not RDFE. So expect things with low hit counts, old RDFE modules to have us close them. What we do want, though, is to hear from you. If we're closing issues that you really think we should still take care of, don't hesitate to reactivate that. And also expect that you will see a large number of these get closed out. We want to focus on experiments. We want to focus on moving forward. We want to focus on conforming to PowerShell standards. So anything in those buckets, we will absolutely address. And then the rest, we're just going to get rid of them. We will start to judge ourselves and our partners internally on the health of the repo, and that includes GitHub issues. So the goal here is really to get to a known state and then really start addressing these so we can treat this more like a live site. I think of the GitHub repo exactly as that. It is a live site, and we should be taking care of things within a couple releases. We should, or closing it quickly,
or close them, yeah.
And then we can get more feedback, or fixing it in the product within a couple of milestones. So we know we've done a bad job here. You know, we'll try and get into a good state. And like I said, if you don't feel strongly about an issue that we've closed as won't fix, absolutely open it back up and tell us why you think we are doing the wrong thing.
I think the primary point there, Scott, or what I think we really want to reiterate is the fact that we're doing this to try to get to a known state, right? So that we can actually build off that state and address things properly. We've kind of let it get into a bad state, and we know that we need to address that. So we're trying to get into a known state so that we can properly close issues that we're not going to fix within a few releases, and fix those issues that we are going to fix within a few releases as well.
And so that we can hold ourselves accountable for how we do with that.
Exactly.
Right now, it's really hard for us to hold ourselves accountable because the repo is not a known state. Once it gets to a known state, we can start holding ourselves, like I said, accountable for how we do with these issues.
Yep. And it's also to give you the ability to quickly respond back to us, right? If we're resolving something 2 years later and saying we're not going to get to this, the odds of you really fighting for it, or you probably already given up on it, right?
Yeah.
So if we triage it in a way that you don't think is appropriate, we want to get that feedback quicker too, and we want more top of your mind.
Yep. Cool. So I think we had one last thing here. Mark, you wanted to talk a little bit about consistency before we head on to questions.
Yeah, so this kind of goes along with the issues, in that we have a known problem, and we have a lot of existing commandlets which we know are not consistent with PowerShell best practices. So in a lot of these cases, we actually have this data captured that we know we're not consistent, and for now we're just allowing that to go through so we don't end up breaking people. I mean, they're existing commandlets. We're trying not to break people, but one of the things that is going to be a focus going forward, and I don't have an exact timeline yet, so we'll be talking about this later in more of these stand-ups. But one of the focuses is going back to the most used sets of commandlets and making sure that we make them consistent with PowerShell best practices. So that means making sure that piping works the way that it's supposed to work. That means making sure that we're consistent in terms of the functionality. That means making sure that we implement the things in the commandlets that we should, like paging, and like paging and being able to run asynchronously using Azure. And it also means and things like using table formats by default when we go out. So look for this to happen. This is on our radar. This is a major area of focus, along with doing the experiments.
Yeah.
So we're and the other thing I wanted to say about consistency is that right now we think we're getting into a pretty good state when it comes to new commandlets. So for new commandlets, we've instituted over the last few releases a rigorous review process. The PowerShell core team has been really helpful. Joey particularly has been really helpful with doing this. So we're in a state now where when we have new commandlets coming out, we think that they're as conformant with best practices as we can be, and the idea is to get that way with existing commandlets as well over the next several releases. So that's in the plan.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. So I think that was it for our agenda today, but we do have a few people who have joined that might want to make additional comments. So Jonathan, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys. There we go. So I think, Jonathan, if you have any questions for us, either type them in the chat or pipe up real quick.
So we already did type in the chat feedback. Thanks for making it easier to submit the piece-to-help examples.
And
thank you for finding it and making those changes.
Yeah, we want to say back to Jonathan, thank you for contributing so many changes to our help that make our examples better. Yeah,
so we talked either last time or the time before about how the new help is all in Markdown. It's all in our repository. Our repository is the source of truth. And Jonathan has been helping a bunch. He's either filed issues or made edits or filed issues, and then we've been able to respond to them. So we've gotten a lot of good contributions from him. So he has a question here. We've got an issue. Looks like it was opened May 12th.
Azure RM log max events. This is something from Monitor.
Yeah.
Yes. So if I remember correctly, the Monitor team does have a pull request open, like Jonathan said in the chat, that it is open and it should be merged for this upcoming release. So this fix should be seen, when is it? July 7th?
July 7th.
July 7th.
Is when 4.2 will go out. So that's when that fix will be available.
And everybody know that I mean, we've said this in previous ones, but everybody should know that if you go to the milestones in our repo, so if you click on issues and then go to milestones, the milestones are actually when we plan to do releases. So the one for this one is the July milestone, and it says what the code complete date is. So basically anything gets merged before that is going to go into the release, and then when the release actually goes out.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Cool. Any other questions for us, Jonathan? Again, thanks a lot for joining and for all the contributions that you've made recently. It's awesome to see. Cool. So we also had Joey from the from the PowerShell core team join. Joey, did you want to say anything? I think you guys were just on a community stand-up, right?
Yeah. We we plugged you guys. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the link until after our call had ended. But
no problem.
Hopefully some people jumped over to your call from us, and just hopefully this shows everybody that we're all working very closely together. We hear your concerns in a very holistic way across teams and across organizations and all that stuff. Scott really likes my word choice. So it was consternation, I think, was no consternation on this call today. It's a great call. But yeah, no, we're all, you could see we're all friends. We're making things happen. So these guys are the best, and you're all in good hands.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Joey. So the PowerShell team does their stand-up every third Thursday at 10 a.m. on right?
9:30 a.m.
9:30.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can publish a blog in the chat here. We have an ICS file you can use on Skype. It's pros and cons to Hangouts on Air. I like Hangouts on Air a lot, but you guys can probably publish a lot easier. I have to go pull an MP4 and
that's
get
the
it all
reason
uploaded.
why.
But yeah, no, you just hit publish, right? But anyway, I'll paste a thing here. We'd love to have you guys too. If you care about, these guys are getting stuff migrated over to .NET Core right now. If you care about PowerShell Core itself and you want to come talk about it, like Aaron said, third Thursday of the month. So
awesome. Thanks, Joey.
Thanks, guys.
Cool. Any last comments, everyone, before we close out? All right. Cool. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.